So, Mike, you've laid out the dangers that the Delta variant in particular poses to the unvaccinated. But I think that there are many listeners out there who, while fully vaccinated, are still concerned about the Delta variant and how much protection they have against it, and are wondering about whether booster shots may be needed, especially those people who received the Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine. What can you tell our listeners at this point about the potential need for boosters?
I've surely covered for you how both the mRNA vaccines and at least the AstraZeneca as a adeno vaccine platform work, and how important they are to get those. We are all struggling with what does a one-dose J&J vaccine mean when we talk about one-dose data or two-dose data. And this has been a real struggle for me personally. I'll just tell you up front. I have surveyed 21 of my colleagues who I have great respect for. These are the people that I would go to if I were trying to get the kind of advice that I'd want for one of my family members who are ill. And of those individuals, all of them but one said, I would definitely recommend to individuals to get a booster dose of an mRNA vaccine if I had one dose J&J. One individual said, I would only recommend to high-risk individuals for severe disease, people who are immune deficient, immune compromised, that they would do that. And I have felt really uncomfortable in the regards of having kind of what might be considered by some as this inside professional information. And while it has been discussed in the media, you haven't seen many people coming out just saying, do it. And I think that's not fair. We should have this as a public discussion. But it calls the question as to why don't we have more data on J&J? Well, I already mentioned before, only about 12 million doses of one-dose J&J vaccine have been administered in this country, which is just a small percentage of all vaccine doses. So we haven't had that much experience yet with it. The Brits did not, in fact, use J&J, so they could not factor that into their analyses. But I think the real challenge we have right now is why don't we have more information, even here in the United States, that could at least provide direction to the public? None of us, at least I surely don't want to be the one saying, I'm smarter than the ACIP or the FDA, and therefore follow my advice on what to do with a vaccine versus theirs. We all know that would be irresponsible in a way. And yet, when we talk about our own families and what we would do in that kind of off-label concept, why shouldn't the public know about that? Now, there was a study that came out this past week that suggested, based on 8 patients and following up on their immune response as J&J recipients, in terms of in the laboratory, would their immune response, their antibody levels, their T-cell activity, would it protect against a serious illness, hospitalization, or likely even fully protecting you against clinical infection? And the data suggested that one-dose J&J would do that. That's a real paucity of data. We need more information. So I've urged my colleagues at the federal level, at the highest levels of the federal government, we need more clarity on this right away. And, I very much support the fact that my one colleague who said, I would recommend this to anyone who's immune compromised, who immune deficiency, that may not respond well to one dose, as we've seen even with the mRNA vaccines. In some cases, 3-dose approach may be the right approach for those who have this underlying condition. I would say to you, if you are one of those individuals and you have received one dose J&J, get an additional dose of mRNA vaccine. I know, I'm not a clinician. I'm an epidemiologist. I surely am not the FDA or the ACIP, but I'm trying to reflect what has been my experience with the people I most respect and admire in this business. And that's what they're telling their private family members, colleagues, friends, etc. So I hope in the end we find that that's not the case. I do have concerns about the J&J vaccine data. We know from the work that was done with the beta variant and how that actually was a situation where the vaccine only provided at best moderate protection against clinical disease, that it would somehow, after one dose, provide high-level protection against Delta, or even for that matter, really good protection against serious illness or hospitalizations. So this is one we have to resolve quickly. It's one that we don't have the answer to at this point, other than to say, rather be safe than sorry. Now, some people are going to have a hard time getting a second dose of any vaccine if they've had J&J. I've already had many friends who have said they've been turned down because their insurance company keeps track of who's gotten vaccinated, and they go to a pharmacy or to a doctor's office and they're denied access to a second vaccine. This is really, I think, unacceptable at this point. We need to get this figured out as quickly as possible. So I implore my colleagues at the federal level, please bring as much information to the table and clarity as you can, even with incomplete information.